At the Moore School of Electrical Engineering at the University of Pennsylvania, they were very, very strong in computation because there were engineers back then who were moving more toward not just how you do things based on what people did before, but to break new frontiers. And as they did that, the mathematical complications became difficult to solve. So they needed a machine. So they decided electrons are faster, we'll move them through these tubes, and we'll click them on and off, and we'll make a machine that would solve these equations. They created the world's first all-electronic, general-purpose digital computer.
Era modern ini, banyak kegiatan manusia telah beralih secara online, terutama memasuki industri 4.0 seperti sekarang. Komputer menjadi kebutuhan pokok masyarakat. Perkembangan komputer dimulai dari inovasi sederhana pada abad ke-19. Dalam video kali ini, kita akan menjelajahi sejarah perkembangan komputer dari awal hingga saat ini. Pada tahun 1822, seorang ahli matematika asal Inggris, Charles Babbage, menemukan komputer pertama yang ia beri nama different engine. Meskipun berbeda jauh dengan komputer modern, prinsip dasar yang digunakan tetap sama, yaitu melakukan perhitungan atau komputasi. Kemudian, pada tahun 1890-an, Herman Hallerich merancang sistem kartu untuk menghitung hasil sensus Amerika Serikat, menghasilkan penghematan besar bagi pemerintahan. Selain itu, kontribusi Babbage juga meliputi desain konsep komputer analitik pertama yang dianggap sebagai cikal bakal komputer modern. Mesin ini memiliki kemampuan untuk menyimpan program, melakukan pengulangan instruksi, dan bahkan memiliki unit kontrol untuk mengatur operasi mesin. Meskipun tidak pernah sepenuhnya digunakan pada masanya, konsep ini menjadi dasar bagi pengembangan komputer selanjutnya.
Charles Babbage was the only child of a tyrannical London banker, a bully at home. But his money kept his son and heir financially comfortable for life. Cambridge educated in mathematics and supremely self-possessed, Charles became an iconoclastic writer and habitual inventor. In 1832, the drawing room of his London home became a showcase for demonstrations of a small section of his difference engine, a far from finished device by which he intended to revolutionize calculation by mechanizing it. At his soirees, London's intellectual society watched what you see now. As Babbage cranked its handle, this machine produced a series of polynomial calculations that were repeatable and error-free. Most astonishing, it was automatic. Any of his illustrious guests might have operated the handle as well as Charles Babbage, perhaps the geologist Charles Lyell, or Charles Darwin, or Charles Dickens. Once set, the machine seemed able to proceed, to think on its own. But what was called the beautiful fragment of the machine Babbage had intended to build was all he ever finished of it. In fact, his imagination had already moved on to an even more ambitious mechanism, one that would make obsolete the abandoned machine. The analytical engine would be a general-purpose calculating automaton. For most of 30 years, he would revise and improve his notional design. Only a few partial sections of it were built, this one after Babbage's death by his son. The analytical engine was an ever-evolving machine. Each breakthrough elegantly drawn up, annotated to describe mechanical motions with a coding system that Babbage claimed was his finest invention. The analytical engine may be the most intricate operating mechanism ever fully realized with paper and imagination alone. In 1846, Babbage abruptly changed course. As if determined to make good on an old obligation, he worked for 2 years to complete a full set of drawings for difference engine number 2. It would require 8,000 parts, only a third as many as the first. He offered it to the government, but did not protest when it declined to build it, and the drawings were carefully put away. Eventually, they came from the Babbage estate to rest in the library of the Science Museum in London. More than 130 years later, in 1985, the museum's new curator of computing, Doran Swade, became convinced the institution could build difference engine number 2. After all, with the intact drawings, it seemed feasible and within financial reach. It took 17 years and drama to rival Babbage's so long ago. And it works, just as Babbage designed it. Every turn of the engine's driving handle is carried through gears, cams, rods, levers, and springs to release and arrest precisely aligned number wheels. A helical arrangement of steel fingers continually pulls the register towers to find and perform the carrying of tens. In its continuing sweep upward, it is mesmerizing. The intricate printing section can be programmed for 1, 2, or 3 column output, for 2 font sizes at once, for variable margins and column gaps, even word wrap where necessary. It prints hard copy on paper and simultaneously impresses the same output into a tray of plaster to produce a stereotype, a mold for casting a full-page printing plate. When a tray is full, the printer pauses the entire machine. In the spring of 2008, a clone of DE2 commissioned by Nathan Myhrvold was completed at the Science Museum and shipped to California. At the Computer History Museum, it would charm new thousands of discerning eyes. Today, the crotchety proud genius, who never managed to prove it during his lifetime, has a fair claim to honor as a pioneer in the history of intelligent machines, just as his parlor guests in 1832 suggested. His difference engine continues to inspire the admiration of his intellectual heirs, a celebrated and unique icon to chroniclers of computing. Charles Babbage, remember, never saw it, except in his stubborn, prescient dreams.
Pada tahun 1990-an, Alan Turing, seorang peneliti matematika, mengembangkan konsep komputer digital pertama kali yang diberi nama Turing Machine. Conrad Zuse, seorang insinyur Jerman, juga menciptakan komputer digital pertamanya, yaitu Z1, pada tahun 1936. Perkembangan ini terus berlanjut hingga Perang Dunia Kedua.
The war started, they were picked especially to do computations for the Army for long guns and the firing tape. They solved these equations that they thought would take 2 years in 2 hours. They did it. So the world changed.
You know, without ENIAC and the University of Pennsylvania and the city of Philadelphia, we wouldn't have Google, we wouldn't have Microsoft, we wouldn't have, you know, the things that are driving today's economy and the rapid innovation that keep happening in computer devices.
People just create things even if they're not being prompted to. That's what human beings are about.
Di mana negara-negara terlibat berusaha mengembangkan komputer untuk keperluan strategis mereka.
ENIAC was revolutionary in being the first large-scale general-purpose electronic digital computer ever built and led to the evolution towards modern computer technology by developing the stored program architecture that is the fundamental architecture for all computers today.
John von Neumann, seorang ilmuwan komputer dan matematikawan yang berperan penting dalam pengembangan teori komputasi, juga memberikan kontribusi besar dalam merancang arsitektur komputer modern. Konsep desain yang diusulkan yang dikenal sebagai arsitektur von Neumann menetapkan dasar bagi struktur komputer yang terdiri dari unit pemrosesan pusat, CPU, memori, input dan output, dan unit kontrol. Pada tahun 1951, arsitektur von Neumann diadopsi dalam pembuatan komputer berkomersial pertama, yaitu UNIVAC 1, yang dipromosikan oleh perusahaan Remington Rand.
Assembly began in June 1944. ENIAC was completed in 1946 after 200,000 man-hours. ENIAC was 1,000 times faster than any other calculating machine ever built. It could do the work of 20,000 people working by hand. What a desk calculator could do in 20 hours, ENIAC could do in 30 seconds. It could discriminate the sign of a number and compare numbers for equality. It could add, subtract, multiply, divide, and extract square roots. In 1 second, it could add a 5-digit number 5,000 times. ENIAC required a room 30 feet wide and 50 feet long. The 40 panels, side by side, would be 100 feet long. It weighed 30 tons. It required 3 times as much electricity as the largest broadcasting station. This wonderful machine, devised by Eckert and Mauchly and their colleagues, had most of the components found in computers to this day. ENIAC's electronic gate, buffer, and flip-flop concepts are standard circuitry today. There is a great similarity between ENIAC and present computers. The thousands of tiny neon lights were arranged like an abacus to light up by 5,000 electronic pulses per second. The lights shown here were specially designed for demonstration purposes only. ENIAC was tested at the University of Pennsylvania and accepted by Army Ordnance in July 1946. At the Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland, ENIAC began operating in August 1947. Soon it became a workhorse for solving the scientific problems of the nation. ENIAC worked with weather prediction, the hydrogen bomb, cosmic rays, and wind tunnel design, among other things, in addition to ballistic tables for the United States Army and the United States Air Force. In building ENIAC, better methods had been found, and so another was never built. At 11:45 p.m. on October 2nd, 1955, ENIAC's power was cut off. Stored at Aberdeen, components of the world's first electronic computer will probably be distributed to various museums. ENIAC lived long and served well. Meanwhile, Mr. Eckert and Dr. Mauchly had designed another computer. It was called BINAC. BINAC was much faster than ENIAC, much cheaper to operate, and magnetic tape could be used instead of punched cards. BINAC led to UNIVAC. Now the Eckert-Mauchly partnership joined the Remington Rand Company. Almost overnight, it seemed, electronic computers became big business. UNIVAC, a universal automatic computer, was delivered 10 years ago. The past 10 years have seen computers by many other companies. When the first electronic computer was planned, it was estimated that there could never be a market for more than 2 or 3. Today, there are more than 5,000 computers. Computers are in business, in factories. Computers track our lives from the start to the finish. Computers are on the ocean and under the ocean and in the air and above the air. Can anyone say the sky is the limit? Now, whatever became of Eckert and Mauchly, who started the whole business of electronic computers? Mr. Eckert, now a vice president of the Remington Rand division of the Sperry Rand Corporation in New York City, is still searching for better and faster ways to solve problems for science and industry.
When we first started building computers many years ago, we used to speak of milliseconds, or a thousandth of a second. Then as we got into vacuum tube computers and various types of solid-state computers and transistors, we used microseconds and fractions of microseconds. Now that we've gone into technologies which use thin films and which use tunnel diodes and some of the newer elements, we are starting to deal with millimicroseconds, which is a billionth of a second.
Mr. Eckert remains closely associated with Dr. Mauchly, a consultant with his own company, Mauchly Associates, in Ambler, Pennsylvania. What are you working on now, Dr. Mauchly?
I'm working on what interests me the most of all, that is the computer as a tool. We know that man's progress has been through the use of tools, whether they're carpenter's tools, machinist's tools, or the tools of language, the printing press. The most important tool the businessman has today is the general data processing facilities, the information processing of the electronic computer. A recent magazine article has emphasized this new aspect of the computer use. The software is just as important as the hardware of the computer. In our own work, we have, for instance, found a great deal of advantage in a particular technique known as the critical path method of scheduling. This is an instance where the software has added much to the value of the computer for the use of management and industry. Of course, all this software wouldn't be of much use unless we were making advances in hardware too. So, Press, come on in and tell us about the hardware.
Well, I think that the main thing that's been happening on hardware in the last few years has just been to strive for more and more speed. And I think that we've got to find some new ingredient in all this, which is probably going to be a new ingredient in software and a new one in hardware, which doesn't just build the kind of arithmetic machine we've been building, but introduces some.
UNIVAC 1 menjadi tenggat penting dalam sejarah komputer komersial karena merupakan salah satu komputer pertama yang dirancang untuk menggunakan bisnis dan pemerintahan. Penggunaan arsitektur von Neumann memungkinkan UNIVAC 1 untuk menjalankan berbagai aplikasi komputasi dengan lebih efektif, termasuk pemrosesan data dan analisis statistik.
UNIVAC, a universal automatic computer, was delivered 10 years ago. The past 10 years have seen computers by many other companies. When the first electronic computer was planned, it was estimated that there could never be a market for more than 2 or 3. Today, there are more than 5,000 computers. Computers are in business, in factories. Computers track our lives from the start to the finish.
Generasi pertama komputer ditandai dengan penggunaan tabung vakum. Kemudian berkembang menjadi generasi kedua dengan menemukan transistor pada tahun 1948.
The period of first generation computer was 1940 to 1956 using vacuum tubes. Hardware technology. The first generation of computers started using vacuum tubes as the basic components for memory and circuitry for CPU, that is Central Processing Unit. The input to the computer was through punched cards and paper tapes. The output was displayed as printouts. Software technology. The instructions were written in machine language which uses zeros and ones for coding of the instructions. Physical appearance. These computers were large in size and required a large room for installation. Examples: EDVAC, Electronic Discrete Variable Automatic Computer. EDSAC, Electronic Delay Storage Automatic Calculator. UNIVAC, Universal Automatic Computer. ENIAC, electronic numerical integrator and computer. Application. Main application areas were scientific computation, record keeping, payroll processing, etc.
Kemudian pada tahun 1960-an, komputer generasi ketiga menggunakan integrated circuit IC memperkecil ukuran mesin dan meningkatkan kinerja supaya lebih tinggi lagi. Kemudian pada tahun 1960-an terjadi lonjakan signifikan dalam menggunakan integrated circuit IC dalam pembuatan komputer yang kemudian menjadi ciri khas dari generasi ketiga komputer IC. Sering disebut sebagai chip, mengintegrasikan beberapa transistor, resistor, komputasi, dan komponen-komponen elektrik lainnya dalam satu chip silikon tunggal. Ini tidak hanya mengurangi ukuran fisik dari komputasi secara dramatis, tetapi juga meningkatkan kinerja kendalanya. Komputer generasi ketiga mampu menjalankan aplikasi yang lebih kompleks dan lebih cepat sehingga lebih efisien daripada pendahulunya, membuat jalan bagi pengguna komputer dalam berbagai industri dan aplikasi ini semakin meningkat. Pada tahun 1970-an, komputer generasi keempat muncul dengan menggunakan mikroprosesor, memungkinkan ukuran yang lebih kecil lagi dan lebih efisien. Pada titik ini, komputer menjadi lebih terjangkau dan digunakan secara luas di berbagai industri di sektor industri. Pada tahun 1971, Intel memamerkan mikroprosesor pertama mereka yang disebut dengan Intel 4004 yang merupakan tonggak sejarah dalam perkembangan komputer. Mikroprosesor ini menandai awal dari era komputer generasi keempat, di mana semua fungsi pemrosesan data terkonsentrasi dalam sebuah chip pengembangan komputer yang lebih kecil, lebih murah, dan lebih efisien secara energi. Seiring dengan itu, komputer menjadi lebih terjangkau lagi, konsumen individu, dan digunakan secara luas di berbagai industri di sektor. Tidak hanya sebagai alat bisnis dan atau ilmiah, tetapi juga sebagai alat hiburan dan komunikasi. Contohnya adalah YouTube dan lain sebagainya. Media sosial juga termasuk dalam hal itu. Hal ini membuat jalan bagi revolusi komputer pribadi dan mengubah cara manusia berinteraksi dengan teknologi secara fundamental. Perkembangan teknologi saat ini terus mengalami lonjakan pesat yang mengubah cara kita hidup, bekerja, dan berinteraksi. Dari kemajuan dalam kecerdasan buatan, AI, yang memungkinkan analisis data lebih canggih sehingga perlunya jaringan 5G yang membuat pintu bagi konektivitas yang lebih cepat dan stabil. Teknologi saat ini menciptakan terobosan yang mengesankan. Revolusi digital juga membawa kemajuan dalam bidang kesehatan dengan perkembangan teknologi medis seperti telemedicine dan penggunaan robotika dalam prosedur operasi yang semakin kompleks. Di sekitar transportasi, mobil, otonom, dan kendaraan listrik mengubah cara kita berpindah dari satu tempat ke tempat lain, sementara di bidang energi, teknologi terbarukan seperti panel surya dan turbin angin membawa kita ke arah masa depan yang lebih berkelanjutan dan lebih terang. Dengan terus berlandasan inovasi, teknologi akan semakin tampak penuh dengan potensi yang mengagumkan untuk menciptakan dunia yang lebih efisien, terhubung, dan berkelanjutan. Dengan inovasi yang lebih berkembang, teknologi telah membawa perubahan yang sangat luar biasa besar dalam kehidupan kita, memperluas batasan kemungkinan, dan memberi kita alat untuk menciptakan potensi terbesar sebagai sebuah kehidupan manusia. Sebagai penutup, mari kita tetap mengapresiasi kemajuan teknologi sambil mengingat pentingnya menggunakan teknologi secara bertanggung jawab untuk menciptakan dunia yang lebih baik bagi semua orang. Semoga kita terus menginspirasi dan memanfaatkan teknologi demi kesejahteraan manusia dan lingkungan kita. Terima kasih teknologi atas semua yang telah Anda berikan. Sekian dari saya, salam teknologi.